The Night Guard of the Haunted School. Part 1. The clock struck midnight, and the old school building loomed like a shadow against the moonlit sky. Its once vibrant walls were now faded and cracked, whispering tales of forgotten laughter and unspoken fears. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves outside. This was no ordinary school. It was a place where legends thrived and nightmares took root. Jake Thompson, the newly appointed night guard, stood at the entrance, clutching his flashlight like a lifeline. He had heard the stories, the tales of students who vanished without a trace, the ghostly figures seen wandering the halls after dark. But Jake was practical. He believed in logic over law. He had taken this job to pay off his student loans, not to entertain ghost stories. As he stepped inside, the heavy door creaked ominously behind him. The scent of dust and decay filled his nostrils, and he shivered involuntarily. The school was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Jake made his way down the dimly lit corridor, his footsteps echoing against the tiled floor. He paused outside room 101, where it was said that a young girl had mysteriously disappeared decades ago. According to local legend, her spirit still roamed these halls, searching for something she could never find. Jake chuckled softly to himself. He had always been skeptical of such tales. He peered through the small window on the door, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just empty desks and dusty chairs. Get a grip, he muttered under his breath as he continued his patrol. Each room he passed seemed to hold its own secrets, some doors slightly ajar, as if inviting him to explore further. He shook off the feeling of unease creeping up his spine and focused on his duties. He checked locks, ensured windows were secure, and made mental notes of any strange sounds. But as the hours dragged on, Jake couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling that he was being watched. Every now and then, he would catch a glimpse of movement in his peripheral vision, just shadows darting away when he turned to look directly at them. He dismissed it as fatigue. After all, he hadn't slept well in days. At precisely 2:45 a.m., Jake settled into a chair in the main office, hoping to catch a brief moment of rest before his shift ended. Just as he closed his eyes, a loud bang echoed through the hallway, jolting him awake. Heart racing, he grabbed his flashlight and rushed toward the source of the noise. The sound led him to room 203. A classroom that had been locked since last semester due to its dilapidated state. As he approached, Jake noticed that the door was slightly ajar. A chill ran down his spine as he pushed it open further with trembling hands. Inside, the room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight streaming through a broken window. Desks were overturned, papers scattered across the floor as if a storm had swept through. But what caught Jake's attention was an old wooden chair rocking gently in the corner, despite there being no breeze. "Hello?" Jake called out cautiously, his voice trembling slightly in the stillness. Silence answered him. He stepped further into the room, flashlight beam dancing across walls adorned with faded drawings from long ago students. Suddenly, a cold gust swept through him, sending chills racing across his skin. The rocking chair stopped abruptly, as if someone had just sat down in it. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He backed away slowly, but caught sight of something glimmering on one of the desks. A small silver locket, half buried under debris. Compelled by curiosity, despite his better judgment, he reached for it. As soon as his fingers brushed against it, a deafening crash echoed from behind him. A sound so loud it felt like thunder within those four walls. Spinning around in panic, Jake found himself face to face with an apparition. A translucent figure of a girl with hollow eyes and an expression of sorrow etched across her face. The clock struck 3 a.m. This segment sets up an eerie atmosphere while introducing key elements that will develop throughout your story. You can build on this foundation in subsequent parts. The Night Guard of the Haunted School. Part 2. Jake stood frozen, his heart racing as the ghostly figure of the girl hovered before him. Her translucent form flickered in the dim light, casting an otherworldly glow that illuminated the dark corners of room 203. The sorrow in her hollow eyes pierced through him, and for a moment he felt an overwhelming sense of despair wash over him. "Help me?" Her voice was barely a whisper, echoing in the stillness like a haunting melody. It was a plea that resonated deep within Jake's chest, stirring feelings he didn't understand. He had always prided himself on being rational, but now, faced with the impossible, he felt his grip on reality slipping. "Who are you?" Jake managed to stammer, his voice trembling despite his efforts to sound brave. "What do you want?" The girl pointed towards the back of the room, her finger trembling as if she were trying to direct his gaze to something unseen. Jake hesitated, glancing back at the locket on the desk before returning his attention to her. Is it about this?" he asked, picking up the silver locket and holding it up for her to see. As soon as he did, her expression shifted from sorrow to something akin to desperation. She nodded slowly, and in that instant, Jake felt a surge of determination. He didn't know what had happened to this girl or why she lingered in this forsaken place, but he knew he couldn't leave her like this. With cautious steps, Jake approached the back of the room where she had pointed. There was an old chalkboard covered in dust and faded drawings from years past. As he brushed away some of the dust with his hand, he noticed something etched into the wood. A name. "Emily Carter." "Emily," he whispered, feeling a connection forming between them. "Is that your name?" The ghostly figure nodded again, and Jake felt an inexplicable urge to uncover her story. He glanced back at her face. It was filled with both hope and fear. "What happened to you?" he asked softly. Suddenly the atmosphere shifted. A cold draft swept through the room, causing papers to flutter like trapped birds. The lights flickered ominously, as if responding to Emily's anguish. Jake steadied himself against a desk as visions began to flash before his eyes. Images of laughter turning into screams, children running in terror, and a dark figure lurking in the shadows. He gasped as he saw Emily's face among them, her eyes wide with fear as she reached out for help that never came. The vision faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Jake breathless and shaken. "Help me find peace," Emily pleaded again, her voice stronger now, but still tinged with sadness. "I need you to remember me." Jake swallowed hard. He felt an overwhelming responsibility resting on his shoulders. "What do I need to do?" he asked earnestly. The ghost pointed once more toward the door, leading out of room 203. With a deep breath, Jake nodded and stepped toward it. He knew that uncovering Emily's story was crucial not just for her sake, but also for his own sanity. As they left room 203 behind, Jake felt a strange bond forming between him and the spirit. He could sense her presence guiding him through the dark hallways of the school. They moved silently past classrooms filled with shadows and echoes of laughter long gone. "Where do we go?" Jake whispered into the darkness. "To the library." Emily's voice echoed softly in his mind. The library was at the far end of the building, a place where countless stories lay dormant among dusty shelves. As they approached its heavy wooden doors, Jake hesitated for a moment. The library was rumored to be one of the most haunted spots in the school. Many night guards had reported strange occurrences there, books flying off shelves and whispers filling the air. But with Emily by his side, her presence both comforting and unnerving, he pushed open the door. The library was cloaked in shadows. Moonlight filtered through grimy windows, casting eerie patterns on the floor. "Over there," Emily directed him toward a section filled with old yearbooks and archives. As Jake moved closer, he noticed a small table littered with forgotten papers and dusty tomes. He began sifting through them, searching for anything that might shed light on Emily's fate. His fingers brushed against an old yearbook from 1995, the year Emily had disappeared. Flipping through its pages, he finally found her picture. A bright-eyed girl with a wide smile that seemed to radiate joy. But beneath her photo was something else. A note scribbled hastily, "Emily knows too much." Jake's heart sank as he read those words aloud. What had happened to her? Why was she trapped here? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from behind him. A book had fallen off a nearby shelf without any apparent cause. Startled, Jake turned around just in time to see shadows swirling around him as if they were alive. "Jake!" Emily cried out urgently. "We need to hurry." With adrenaline pumping through his veins, Jake grabbed the yearbook and raced back toward Emily's apparition. Together, they fled deeper into the library as chaos erupted around them. The whispers grew louder, echoing warnings from long ago. As they reached another doorway at the back of the library, marked restricted access, Jake felt an undeniable pull, urging him forward. He glanced back at Emily. Determination shone in her eyes. "Let's find out what really happened," he said resolutely. And with that declaration hanging in the air between them, they stepped into darkness together, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. This segment continues building tension while developing both Jake's character and his connection with Emily's spirit. You can use this foundation for further exploration of their journey. As Jake and Emily stepped through the doorway marked restricted access, a chill enveloped them, thicker than the air outside. The dimly lit corridor beyond was lined with shelves filled with old books and artifacts that had long been forgotten. Dust motes danced in the narrow beams of moonlight filtering through grimy windows, creating an ethereal atmosphere that felt both magical and foreboding. "Stay close," Jake whispered, feeling an inexplicable sense of urgency. He could sense that they were on the brink of uncovering something monumental, something that could finally free Emily from her torment. The corridor twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the school. The walls were adorned with faded photographs of students and faculty from decades past, their eyes seeming to follow Jake as he moved. He felt a shiver run down his spine, but pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. "Where do we go from here?" he asked Emily, who floated beside him, her form shimmering slightly in the low light. "There's a hidden room at the end of this corridor," she replied, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. "It's where they kept records, things that were never meant to be seen. Jake nodded, his heart pounding in anticipation. As they approached the end of the corridor, he noticed a heavy wooden door that appeared newer than the rest. It was slightly ajar, as if inviting them in. He pushed it open cautiously, revealing a small room cluttered with stacks of boxes and old filing cabinets. The air inside was musty, filled with the scent of aged paper and forgotten memories. Jake stepped inside, shining his flashlight around to illuminate the darkness. "What are we looking for?" he asked. "Anything related to me?" "My disappearance," Emily urged. "There must be something here that explains what happened." Jake began rifling through the boxes, pulling out old yearbooks, attendance records, and faded photographs. Each item felt like a piece of a puzzle waiting to be assembled. He opened one box labeled Historical Records and began sifting through its contents. "Here," he exclaimed suddenly, pulling out an envelope marked with Emily's name in elegant script. His heart raced as he carefully opened it, revealing a collection of yellowed papers inside. "These are notes from your teachers," he said, scanning through them quickly. "They mention you being a bright student, but also something about you being too inquisitive." Emily leaned closer, her expression intense as she read over his shoulder. "Inquisitive? What does it say?" Jake continued reading aloud. "Emily Carter has shown an unusual interest in the school's history and certain events surrounding its past." He paused, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach as he read further. "Some faculty members believe she may have uncovered information that could disrupt the status quo." "What does that mean?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with confusion and fear. "It sounds like they were worried about what you knew," Jake replied thoughtfully. "Maybe you stumbled upon something they wanted to keep hidden." He pulled out another document, a handwritten letter dated just days before Emily's disappearance. As he read it aloud, his voice grew heavy with emotion. "Our Emily, I understand your curiosity about our school's past. However, some things are better left undiscovered. You must stop asking questions about the old building and its former students. There are secrets here that could harm you. Please take care." Jake looked up at Emily, who was visibly shaken. "They were warning you," he said softly. "They knew something was wrong." Tears glistened in Emily's eyes as she absorbed this revelation. "I didn't listen," she whispered. "I thought I could handle it. I just wanted to know why so many students had disappeared." Jake's heart ached for her. He could feel her pain and regret radiating from her spirit. "We'll find out what happened," he promised firmly. "We'll uncover everything." He continued to search through the room until he found another box filled with old photographs. As he flipped through them, one image caught his eye. A group of students standing outside the school during what appeared to be a celebration. Among them was Emily, smiling brightly alongside her friends. But there was something else in the background. A shadowy figure lurking just beyond their joyful gathering, watching them intently. "Who is that?" Jake wondered aloud as he pointed at the figure. Emily leaned closer, squinting at the photograph. "I don't know. I've never seen him before." Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside their makeshift sanctuary. A sound so powerful it rattled the shelves around them. Jake jumped back instinctively as dust fell from above. "What was that?" Emily gasped. "I don't know," Jake replied urgently, glancing toward the door they had entered through. The shadows outside seemed to grow darker and more menacing. "We need to leave," Emily urged him. Without hesitation, Jake grabbed the envelope containing Emily's documents and stuffed it into his backpack before rushing toward the door. As they exited into the corridor once more, they were met by an oppressive darkness that seemed to pulse around them like a living entity. "Stay close," Jake shouted over his shoulder as they hurried down the hallway. The atmosphere grew heavier with each step they took. Whispers filled the air, frantic voices echoing warnings from long ago. Shadows darted just beyond their line of sight, teasing them with glimpses of movement before disappearing into nothingness. As they reached a junction in the hallway, Jake paused for breath while glancing around frantically for any sign of escape or safety. "Where do we go now?" he panted. "There's an exit at the end of this corridor." Emily pointed ahead toward another door marked "Emergency Exit." "We can get out there." Just then, an icy wind swept through the hallway, extinguishing their flashlight momentarily before flickering back to life. In that brief moment of darkness, Jake felt an overwhelming presence closing in on them, a force so powerful it sent chills down his spine. "We have to move," he shouted again as dread washed over him like cold water. They sprinted toward the exit door when suddenly it swung open violently on its own, revealing not freedom, but an abyss of swirling darkness beyond. "No!" Jake cried out instinctively as he felt a pull toward it, a magnetic force trying to draw him into its depths. "Don't look back!" Emily shouted desperately as she grasped his arm tightly. With all her strength combined with his own willpower, they pushed against the dark energy, threatening to consume them both. Together, they fought against whatever malevolent force awaited them on the other side, determined not only for their survival, but also for justice for all those lost within these haunted walls. With one final surge, forward fueled by adrenaline and hope for freedom ahead, their bodies collided against solid ground just outside, the air fresh and filled with promise beyond despair. Panting heavily as dawn broke on this fateful night, the first rays of sunlight illuminating their path, they finally emerged from their harrowing ordeal into safety, yet uncertainty lingered in their hearts about what lay ahead. This segment continues building tension while delving deeper into Emily's backstory and their shared journey toward uncovering hidden truths within the haunted school. As Jake and Emily stumbled out of the school, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the landscape. The oppressive darkness that had enveloped them in the school began to dissipate, but the weight of their experiences lingered heavily in the air. Jake took a moment to catch his breath, his heart still racing from their narrow escape. "Are we safe?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly as she looked around. The morning light illuminated her ethereal form, making her appear almost solid for a moment. Jake could see the worry etched on her face. "For now," he replied, glancing back at the looming structure behind them. The school stood silent, its windows like dark eyes watching their every move. "But we need to figure out what happened to you and why they wanted to keep it hidden." Emily nodded, determination replacing her earlier fear. "I can't rest until I know the truth. If there's a chance to uncover what really happened, we have to take it." With renewed purpose, they made their way toward a nearby park bench where they could sit and gather their thoughts. Jake pulled out the envelope containing Emily's documents, and laid them on the bench between them. As he sorted through the papers, he felt a sense of urgency wash over him. "Let's start with this letter," he suggested, holding up the handwritten note that had warned Emily about her curiosity. "It seems like it was written by someone who cared about you." Emily leaned closer, her eyes scanning the words. "I remember my teachers being protective, but I never thought they would go to such lengths. They must have known something was going on." Jake flipped through more papers until he found another note. This one was more formal and typed. "To whom it may concern, it has come to our attention that certain students have been asking questions regarding past incidents at our institution. We must remind everyone that some histories are better left buried. Any further inquiries will not be tolerated and may result in disciplinary action." "This is chilling," Jake muttered. They were trying to silence anyone who dug too deep. Emily's expression darkened as she absorbed this information. "They were afraid of what I might find." But why? What were they hiding? Jake rifled through more documents and found an old newspaper clipping dated back to 1995, the year Emily disappeared. The headline read, "Mysterious Disappearances Plague Local School." The article detailed a series of unexplained vanishings involving students over several years, with Emily's name mentioned among them. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing to a photograph accompanying the article. It showed a group of students standing outside the very same school building they had just escaped from. A cheerful scene juxtaposed against the ominous headline. Emily gasped as she recognized familiar faces among her friends in that photograph. "That was taken just weeks before everything happened," she said softly. Jake continued reading. "Authorities are baffled by these disappearances and urge anyone with information to come forward." He paused for a moment before adding, "It seems like no one ever did." "Because they were scared," Emily replied bitterly. "They didn't want to end up like me." Jake felt anger bubbling within him. Not just for Emily, but for all those who had suffered in silence due to fear and intimidation. "We need to find out who was responsible for all this," he declared firmly. Emily nodded in agreement. "There must be someone who knows what happened. Someone who can help us piece together this puzzle." As they sat on the bench, sunlight streaming down around them, Jake realized that their journey was far from over. They needed allies, people who could help them uncover the truth behind Emily's disappearance and the dark history of the school. "Do you know anyone who might have information?" he asked. Emily thought for a moment before answering. "There's an old janitor named Mr. Hargrove who worked at the school for decades. He's seen things that others haven't." Her voice dropped to a whisper as she added, "I think he knows more than he lets on." "Then we need to find him," Jake said decisively. "Where can we locate him?" "He usually hangs around a diner near the school after his shifts," Emily replied, her spirit flickering with hope. "Let's go there." With renewed purpose, they made their way toward the diner, a small establishment called the Rusty Spoon, that had seen better days but still held a certain charm with its retro decor and friendly atmosphere. As they entered, the smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled their senses. A few patrons sat at booths scattered throughout the diner, chatting quietly over their meals while waitresses bustled about, taking orders. Jake scanned the room until his gaze landed on an older man seated alone at a corner booth. His grizzled hair and weathered face spoke of years spent working hard under dim lights and dusty ceilings. That must be him, Jake said quietly as they approached Mr. Hargrove. The janitor looked up as they neared. His eyes narrowed with suspicion at first, but then softened when he recognized Emily's presence beside Jake. "Emily?" he said incredulously, his voice thick with emotion. "Is that really you?" "Yes, Mr. Hargrove," she replied softly, her voice trembling with both joy and sorrow at seeing someone from her past again. "What happened to you?" he asked urgently, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear them. I don't know everything yet," she admitted. "But I need your help to understand what happened back then." Mr. Hargrove sighed heavily as he gestured for them to sit down across from him. "I've been waiting for someone to ask me about those days," he said quietly once they were settled in their seats. Jake leaned forward intently as Mr. Hargrove began recounting stories from years gone by, tales of strange occurrences within those walls, and whispers among faculty members about students who had vanished without explanation. There were rumors about an underground network operating within the school, a group that dealt with things best left unspoken. Mr. Hargrove explained gravely. "What kind of things?" Jake pressed. "Dark things," Mr. Hargrove replied solemnly. "Things that involved rituals and sacrifices, all in pursuit of power or knowledge." His voice dropped lower, as if afraid even mentioning it would summon something sinister. Emily gasped softly at his words while Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The implications were horrifying, yet compelling, enough to keep him focused on uncovering more truths hidden beneath layers of fear. They didn't want anyone digging too deep into those secrets. Mr. Hargrove continued cautiously, after taking a sip from his coffee cup. "I saw things I shouldn't have seen. Students disappearing after getting too close. Even some teachers went missing." "What do you mean?" Jake asked urgently. "There were whispers about a secret society operating within those walls. A group that believed they could harness power through dark rituals involving students," Mr. Hargrove explained grimly. Emily's expression turned grave as she absorbed this information. It was becoming clear why she had been targeted all those years ago. "But why you?" Jake asked gently, trying to piece together their shared history with this new revelation. "I was curious," Emily admitted quietly, her eyes downcast as memories flooded back. Moments filled with excitement, quickly overshadowed by fear when she realized how dangerous her questions had become. Mr. Hargrove nodded knowingly. He understood all too well how curiosity could lead one down treacherous paths filled with unforeseen consequences. "I tried warning you," he said softly but firmly. Regret laced his tone, like an old wound refusing to heal completely, despite time passing since then. "But now that you're here again, there may still be hope." Mr. Hargrove continued resolutely. Determination ignited within him, as if rekindling long-buried flames, readying themselves for battle against darkness once more. "If we can gather evidence against those responsible, if we can expose their secrets, we might finally put an end to this nightmare once and for all." Jake felt adrenaline surge through him. Hope blossomed alongside fear, a potent mix driving them forward toward justice. "What do we need?" he asked eagerly, readying himself for whatever challenge lay ahead. "We'll need proof, something tangible linking those involved directly back into these events," Mr. Hargrove replied thoughtfully while glancing around cautiously before leaning closer as if sharing confidential information meant only for trusted ears alone. There are records hidden away in an old storage room beneath the school, documents detailing everything from student activities leading up until disappearances occurred. Jake exchanged glances with Emily. Determination shone brightly within both their eyes. "We'll go back," Jake declared resolutely, no longer afraid but emboldened by newfound knowledge gained during this encounter. "Are you sure?" Emily asked hesitantly, uncertainty creeping back into her voice, despite eagerness shining through. "Yes," he reassured her firmly. "We owe it not only ourselves, but also everyone else affected by what transpired there." With renewed purpose fueling them onward, the trio finished their meals quickly before heading out into daylight once more. As they made their way back towards school grounds, the sun shining brightly overhead, casting shadows across pavement below, they felt lighter, yet burdened simultaneously, carrying weighty truths along with newfound resolve. Once inside familiar corridors again, they navigated carefully, avoiding areas where shadows lurked menacingly, waiting silently, watching every move made by trespassers daring enough return. Finally, reaching storage room entrance hidden behind heavy door marked authorized personnel only, Jake took deep breath, steeling himself against whatever lay beyond. With one final push, the door creaked open, revealing darkness within illuminated only by flickering overhead lights, struggling against age-old dust, choking air surrounding them. Inside lay stacks upon stacks, filled with boxes containing forgotten relics, long abandoned, waiting patiently for someone brave enough venture forth unearthing lost histories buried deep beneath layers obscured by time itself. "Help me find it," he urged Emily excitedly while rummaging through piles, searching desperately, seeking evidence proving wrongdoing committed against innocent lives lost along the way. Minutes turned into hours spent sifting through papers, uncovering fragments, piecing together stories woven throughout history, revealing patterns repeating themselves over generations. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed throughout room, causing both jump startled instinctively, reaching out, grasping each other tightly, fearing unseen forces lurking nearby, waiting patiently strike again when least expected. "What was that?" Emily whispered fearfully, while glancing around anxiously, searching shadows surrounding them. "I don't know," Jake replied breathlessly, feeling adrenaline coursing through veins, heightening senses, alerting him danger approaching, rapidly closing in fast. Just then, a figure emerged from darkness, stepping forward, revealing itself clearly illuminated under flickering lights above. It was one of those responsible, the very individuals intent silencing anyone daring question authority, challenging status quo, maintaining control over lives trapped within confines, oppressive walls built upon secrets hidden away. "No!" Jake shouted defiantly, stepping protectively in front of Emily, shielding her from harm while preparing himself face whatever came next. "You shouldn't have come back here." The figure sneered menacingly, advancing closer, threateningly looming larger than life itself, casting long shadows across floor, beneath feet trembling, beneath weight bearing down upon them both. "We're not afraid," Emily shouted boldly, surprising even herself, finding strength rising up within, despite fear threatening, overwhelmed completely. But just then, the lights flickered violently, plunging room into darkness, leaving only sounds echoing off walls, reverberating hauntingly, filling air, thick tension, palpable, lingering between adversaries locked together, battle wills, wits, Determination, courage standing strong against overwhelming odds stacked high against them both. And just when it seemed all hope lost, a blinding flash erupted, illuminating space, momentarily revealing truths hidden beneath layers obscured by time itself, illuminating paths forward, leading toward freedom. Liberation promised long ago, finally coming full circle, completing journey begun so many years prior. As shadows danced around them, swirling wildly, caught between realms torn apart by forces beyond comprehension, they knew one thing remained certain. Whatever happened next would determine fate not only theirs, but countless others trapped within haunted halls, seeking solace amidst chaos, raging outside world, beyond understanding, waiting patiently for reckoning arrive finally, bringing justice long overdue. This segment builds tension while delving deeper into uncovering hidden truths about Emily's past and setting up an intense confrontation with those responsible for her suffering. Let me know if you need further assistance or additional segments. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows across the storage room as the figure stepped closer, its features becoming clearer in the brief flashes of illumination. Jake's heart raced as he recognized the man from the old photographs, the same shadowy figure lurking behind Emily and her friends in that fateful picture. "Who are you?" Jake demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. He stood protectively in front of Emily, ready to defend her against whatever threat this man posed. The figure smirked, a chilling grin that sent shivers down Jake's spine. "You're brave, I'll give you that," he said, his voice smooth yet laced with malice. "But bravery doesn't change your fate. You shouldn't have come back here." Emily stepped forward, her spirit flickering with determination. "You're the one who wanted to silence me. I won't let you do it again." The man's expression turned cold, and he took another step forward, causing Jake to instinctively tighten his grip on Emily's arm. "You think you can just waltz back in here after all these years and demand answers? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Jake felt a surge of anger. "We know enough. We know about the disappearances, about the dark rituals. You can't hide from the truth anymore." The man laughed, a low, menacing sound that echoed off the walls. "Truth? What truth?" "The truth is that some things are better left buried. The school has its secrets for a reason." "What did you do to Emily?" Jake shouted, his voice rising in intensity. "What happened to her and the others?" The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Jake saw a flicker of fear behind his bravado. "You really want to know? You think you can handle it?" "Yes," Emily replied fiercely, her voice unwavering. "I deserve to know what happened to me." With a sigh of resignation, the man stepped back slightly, as if weighing his options. "Very well," he said slowly, "but be warned. Knowledge comes at a cost." Suddenly the lights flickered again, plunging them into darkness for a heartbeat longer than before. When they returned, Jake found himself standing in a different room, a classroom filled with old desks and chairs covered in dust. "What just happened?" he asked, bewildered. The man stood at the front of the room now, gesturing around as if conducting an orchestra of memories. "Welcome to where it all began," he said dramatically. "This is where we gathered. The students who sought knowledge beyond what was allowed." Jake looked around, feeling a sense of dread settle over him. The walls were adorned with faded posters about school policies and rules. Rules that had clearly been broken long ago. "Why did you gather here?" Emily asked, her voice steady, despite the fear lurking beneath. Because we were curious, the man replied, with a hint of nostalgia in his tone. We wanted to uncover the truth about our school's past. Just like you do now. He paused for effect before continuing. But curiosity has its price. We delved into ancient texts and rituals, things we didn't fully understand. His gaze turned distant, as if recalling memories long buried. What kind of rituals? Jake pressed. Rituals meant to unlock hidden powers, he explained slowly. We thought we could harness them for our own gain knowledge that would elevate us above our peers. Emily frowned. And what happened? The more we learned, the more we realized we were meddling with forces beyond our control. The man's voice dropped to a whisper as he continued. One night, during a particularly reckless ceremony, things went horribly wrong. We lost control, and some students never came back. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he processed this revelation. So, you're saying Emily was one of those students? Yes, he admitted reluctantly. She was too curious for her own good, always asking questions no one wanted answered. Emily's expression hardened as she confronted him. And you let me go through it alone. You didn't try to help. I was powerless, he replied defensively. Once we opened that door, it was too late for any of us. Jake stepped forward angrily. You could have warned us. You could have done something. The man raised his hands in surrender. I didn't know what would happen until it was too late. I tried to forget, tried to bury those memories deep within my mind. Why are you telling us this now? Emily asked incredulously. Because, he said slowly, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her shiver. I see something different in you too. A determination I haven't seen in years. Jake felt a flicker of hope ignite within him at those words, but remained cautious about trusting this man completely. What do you mean? Emily pressed. If you truly wish to uncover the truth and put an end to this cycle of fear, he said gravely, you must go back to where it all began. The basement beneath this school holds answers that could change everything. What's down there? Jake asked. The heart of it all, the source of power we tried to harness, he replied ominously. But be warned, it is not just knowledge that lies beneath those floors. There are also dark forces waiting for those who dare disturb their slumber. Emily exchanged glances with Jake. They both understood what needed to be done. We'll go, she declared resolutely. Are you sure? Jake asked softly, concern etched on his face. I have to know what happened, she insisted firmly. With a heavy heart but unwavering resolve, the trio made their way back through hallways leading toward basement entrance, hidden away behind locked doors, guarded by secrets long kept under wraps. As they descended into darkness once more, Jake felt adrenaline coursing through him, anticipation mixed with fear, igniting senses, heightening awareness surrounding them. Once inside basement area, the air grew colder. Shadows danced along walls, flickering ominously under weak light, illuminating path ahead. They moved cautiously deeper into bowels beneath school, each step echoing loudly against concrete floors while whispers filled air around them, creating atmosphere, thick tension palpable lingering between them. Finally, reaching large chamber at center, filled with strange symbols etched into stone walls surrounding them. Jake couldn't shake, feeling something was watching, waiting patiently, lurking just beyond sight. This is it, Mr. Hargrove said quietly, awe mixed with trepidation, evident within his voice. What do we do now? Emily asked nervously, glancing around anxiously, searching shadows lurking nearby. We need to perform a ritual, a counter ritual, to undo whatever binds these spirits here, Mr. Hargrove replied determinedly, while rummaging through belongings, seeking items necessary, completing task ahead. As they gathered materials needed, Jake felt weight pressing down upon him, realization dawning heavy burden, resting squarely upon shoulders, knowing lives depended on success achieved tonight. We can do this, Emily encouraged him fiercely, determination shining brightly within her eyes, igniting hope once more. And so they began. A circle formed around symbols drawn upon floor beneath feet, trembling beneath weight bearing down upon them both. With each word spoken, a chant rising up, filling space around them, echoing off walls reverberating, hauntingly filling air. Thick tension palpable lingering between adversaries, locked together, battle wills, wits, determination, courage, standing strong against overwhelming odds stacked high against them both. As voices rose higher, shadows swirling wildly caught between realms, torn apart by forces beyond comprehension, they knew one thing remained certain. Whatever happened next would determine fate, not only theirs, but countless others, trapped within haunted halls, seeking solace amidst chaos, raging outside world, beyond understanding, waiting patiently for reckoning rife finally, bringing justice long overdue. This segment builds up to an intense climax as Jake and Emily prepare for their final confrontation with the dark forces at play within the haunted school. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or further assistance. As Jake, Emily, and Mr. Hargrove formed a circle around the ancient symbols etched into the concrete floor, the air thickened with anticipation. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, and an unsettling chill swept through the chamber. They could feel the weight of countless souls trapped within these walls, their whispers echoing faintly in the background. Are you ready? Mr. Hargrove asked, his voice steady, despite the tension in the air. Jake nodded, determination coursing through him. We have to do this. Emily took a deep breath, her spirit shimmering with resolve. Let's free them. Together, they began to chant the counter ritual Mr. Hargrove had prepared. The words flowed from their lips, resonating with power and intent. With each syllable spoken, Jake felt a surge of energy building around them, amplifying their voices as if calling forth the very essence of the school itself. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the chamber, and the shadows coalesced into dark forms that writhed and twisted at the edges of their circle. The temperature dropped further, and a bone-chilling wind swept through the room, extinguishing their makeshift light. Keep going, Mr. Hargrove urged, his voice cutting through the chaos. Don't stop. The shadows surged forward, swirling around them like a storm. Jake could feel their coldness pressing against his skin, but he focused on Emily's presence beside him, the warmth of her spirit grounding him amidst the growing darkness. Emily, he shouted above the howling wind, we can do this together. Yes, she replied fiercely, her voice unwavering despite the fear threatening to engulf them. We won't let them win. With renewed strength, they continued chanting louder than before. The symbols on the floor began to glow with an otherworldly light, illuminating their faces as they pushed back against the encroaching darkness. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of voices filled with rage and despair, as they fought against the binding energy of the ritual. But Jake could feel it working. He sensed that they were breaking through. Focus on Emily, he called out to Mr. Hargrove as he locked eyes with her. She's our connection to this place. In that moment of clarity, Emily raised her hands toward the swirling shadows and spoke directly to them. You're not forgotten. You deserve peace. Let go of your anger and find rest. The shadows hesitated for a heartbeat, as if considering her words. Then they surged forward again with renewed fury. Don't let them break us, Mr. Hargrove shouted as he intensified his focus on the ritual. With every ounce of strength they had left, Jake and Emily poured their energy into the chant, each word resonating with purpose and clarity. The symbols on the floor blazed brighter than ever before, illuminating every corner of the chamber. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from beneath them, a wave of light that surged outward like a shockwave. The shadows recoiled in horror, as if burned by its brilliance. Now, Jake yelled triumphantly as he felt an overwhelming force pulling at him. The spirits were breaking free. In that moment of chaos and brilliance, Jake caught glimpses of faces, lost souls finally finding their way home, smiling at Emily with gratitude before vanishing into light. As silence fell over them like a soft blanket after a storm, the shadows dissipated completely, leaving only echoes behind. Whispers fading into nothingness while warmth enveloped all three, standing together amidst remnants lingering within chamber once filled darkness. Breathless but exhilarated, they looked at one another, relief flooding through them as dawn broke outside, illuminating paths ahead, promising new beginnings. We did it, Emily whispered in disbelief, tears glistening in her eyes reflecting joy mixed with sorrow for those lost a long way finally finding peace. Mr. Hargrove smiled warmly, pride evident within his gaze, acknowledging bravery shown throughout this journey taken together.